Hello and welcome to Nithrania YouTube channel. You're watching another episode of the Game in a Nutshell series designed for explaining the board game rules. My name is Branislav Berec and in this video we're going to learn how to play Virtu. However, in this video I'm going to explain the rules for 3, 4 and 5 player games. There are major differences for 2 player games which I'm going to explain in a separate video. So let's get started. To set the game up, place the game board in the middle of the table, using the side for the current player count. This is for a 3 and a 4 player game, the other side is used in a 2 and a 5 player games. Sort these notable cards by their type and place all the stacks in a face-up display next to the game board. Then place these title tiles nearby, as well as these Cathedral, Guild, Kingdom and Republic tiles. Also these neutral city tiles, then these are patronage cards and the patronage tile, and these are indulgent cards, and this is the prestige board. Place it next to the game board as well. Then each player chooses a color and gets all the components of that color, and in a 2-player game only the yellow player and the blue player will be in the game. And make sure the player boards are placed with this side up, showing the 2-player icon on it. In a 3-player game, you will have the yellow player, green and red. In a 4-player game, you will have the yellow player, green, red and blue. And then in a 5-player game, you will also add the white player. So after you choose the color, take 3 family cards, and again, these are only used in a 2-player game. These are used in a 3, 4 and a 5-player game. I'm demonstrating a 3-player game here, so I'm going to use these cards. This is your action marker. Keep it nearby. It will be used on the player board. Then your 2 starting city tiles of your color with this coat of arms with this color side up. Then take 2 of your control discs and place them on your starting cities. Those starting cities are also marked with your color. Then take 3 additional control discs and now randomly determine the starting player and place the disc of that player in the first space of this turn order track, and then place the discs of other players as they are sitting in a clockwise direction. After that, place 1 disc of each player on the city track with the starting player on top and the last player in a turn order at the bottom. So in our example, yellow player on top and a green player at the bottom of the stack. Then do the exact same thing for this patronage track on the prestige board. Place 1 true meeple of your color next to both of your starting cities and keep the other meeples nearby in your supply. Note that all players should have 6 true meeples in total, 4 of them in your supply and 2 on your starting cities. So in a 4-player game, blue player should also use only 6 of those meeples. The remaining 2 meeples are only used in a 2-player game. You also start the game with 2 agents of your color. Keep the other agents of your color in a general supply. And this time the yellow player has an exception because one of the yellow player's family cards allows you to start the game with 3 agents. Finally, each player starts the game with 1 florin. Only in a 3-player game, some cities are unavailable. They are marked with this asterisk symbol, so use these tokens to mark them as unavailable. In Virtu, each player represents a dynasty from the Italian Renaissance period, and your goal as the leader of the dynasty is to establish a power and supremacy and become the master of Italy. The game is played in rounds, which represent years, and each round has a spring phase and a winter phase. In both phases, players take turns in this player order, and in the spring phase, you will move your action marker on your player board and perform the action where you end your movement with your action marker. Then at the end of the spring, any conflicts will be resolved, and after that there is a winter phase in which all players will have to pay salaries to their active troops. You will have a chance to buy new cards and titles, recruit more troops, form alliances and so on. Then the game continues with a new year, new round, and once any player reaches the end of this city track or this patronage track, or if players control all cities on the map, the end of the game will be triggered, and players will score victory points mainly from number of cities you control on the map. Then based on your position on this patronage track, then the player with the most crosses will gain additional victory points, and other players with fewer crosses may also score additional victory points or prestige points. You may also score some points from these titles, and then the player with the most points is the winner. Before you start the game, you have to place your family cards on your player board. Your player board is called the Palace, and these spaces over here, there are 6 of them, are called Cortigiano spaces or Courtier spaces. 3 of these spaces are available from the start of the game. 3 additional can be unlocked during the game. These 5 spaces in your palace are called rooms or action spaces, and these symbols represent actions. By the way, your tableau is called your domain. If you have a family card which has an action symbol on it, you can place that card in one of your rooms or the action spaces, and such card will replace the action in that action space. So in this example, if you take an action in this room, in this action space, you perform this action and not the action which is printed on the player board. Each action space has another card indicated underneath. That space is reserved for a so-called improvement card, and any card with these symbols at the bottom of the card can act as the improvement card. So let's say we do it like this, and then we have one action card and one improvement card in the action space. There can only be maximum one action card and one improvement card in each action space. If the card doesn't have an action symbol on it, it may not be placed in the action space as an action card. It can only be used as an improvement card or as one of the courtiers. And finally, even if the card has an action symbol, it doesn't have to be placed in your palace as an action card. You may place it in a courtier space, or you may use it as the improvement card. So before you start the game, take your family cards and place them in your palace any way you want, following the rules I have just explained. The first phase of each round of each year is the spring phase, and in this phase players take turns in this turn order, starting with the first player and continuing to the last player. On your very first turn of the game, place your action marker in any of these 5 action spaces and perform the action of that action space. Then later in the game, on each of your subsequent turns, you must move your action marker at least 1 or 2 spaces clockwise and then perform the action of the chosen space. Moving your action marker 1 or 2 spaces clockwise is free. If you want to move your action marker additional spaces clockwise, you either have to pay 2 florins or pay 1 arrow symbol. Since we only have 1 florin and no arrow symbol, let's take a look at how you can gain these resources and how you use them. First, when you need florins, at any time during the game, even on opponent's turn, if you have any card or a tile which shows these florins, you can flip them face down, and that generates the indicated number of florins. Take them from the general supply and place them in your treasury. Now, when you need to pay florins, you take them from your treasury and return them back to the general supply. So, for example, for these 2 coins, you would be able to move the action marker 1 additional action space clockwise. Similarly, when you spend this arrow symbol, again you have to flip the tile face down, and you can move your action marker to the next room clockwise. If the tile or the card is face down, you may not use it to generate resources. If the card or the tile shows these slash symbols, it means you can only choose one or the other or the last option. On the other hand, When you move your action marker and then perform the action on the action space, the symbols on the action card and also on the improvement card remain visible. You don't flip them face down, but in this case you have to immediately use those resources. So in this example, if you want to generate 2 florins, you immediately spend them. You don't add them to your treasury. That means if you need to pay for something, any surplus you generate is lost. And one last clarification, you can only use the symbols on these action cards and improvement cards if you take the action in that action space. Now, coming back to moving your action marker, anytime you move your action marker across this arrow symbol, you can flip all the face down Courtier cards on this side of your player board face up. So, for example, moving 2 spaces is free, then I can generate 3 florins, put them in my treasury, then spend 2 of them immediately to move the action marker additional action space clockwise, which moves across the arrow, and that flips all the face down cards on this side of the player board face up. The same applies to this arrow. When you move your action marker across that arrow, you flip all face down Courtier cards on this side of your player board face up. Now, during this spring phase, if you need more crowns or florins and you don't have those resources available, once and only once during this spring phase, you can request this indulgence. You can take that card. It gives you either 1 crown symbol or 3 florins, and after you use one of these benefits, place the card on the current action space. Technically, you do this after you take the action, but from now on, this action space is unavailable. If the current action space would contain any action card or the improvement card, place the indulgence card on top of them, and it still blocks the action on that action space. And if the action space already contains an indulgence card, you may not end your movement there and request another one. Then, when moving your action marker, if you end your movement on the action space with the indulgence card, or if you pass over and you pay 1 cross or 2 crown symbols, you may remove that card from the action space. So, for example, here's 1 crown symbol. There is another one here on this tile. With paying 2 crowns, we can now remove the indulgence card, and the card is returned back to the stack next to the game board. Now you can take the action in that action space. So now I'm going to explain all the actions in the game, and we will start with this first one called the Govern action. This action allows you to reactivate tiles in your domain or to reactivate your alliance bonus. To take the action, you have to pay either 1 crown or 1 cross. For each symbol, you can reactivate up to 2 tiles in your domain, so you flip them back from the exhausted side back to the available side, or you can reactivate your alliance bonus, which means you simply move your marker to the left space and make that bonus available again. I will talk about these alliances during the winter phase. One clarification: when you take this action and you use a symbol from the tile, for example here, you may not use that symbol to reactivate this very same tile. The next action is the Sponsor action. With this action, you can move on this patronage track. You can only make 1 move per year, and in order to make the move, you have to pay the indicated cost. So in this example, 2 florins and either crown or a cross. Then move your marker to the next space. When you reach this second space on this patronage track, or later in the game the 4th space, you immediately take the patronage bonus, either one of these cards or this tile. You can choose any available card or the tile and place the chosen card anywhere in your play area, but not as your courtier and not in your domain. So it is not part of your palace, but it still provides permanent bonuses. This card, for example, gives you 1 prestige point at the end of the game, and this symbol unlocks additional Courtier spot. There are two types of patronage bonuses, one with this symbol and the other one with this one. You can only have one of each type. Now, as I said, you keep these patronage cards somewhere in your play area, but not in your palace and not in your domain, but there are two exceptions. The first one is this Niccolo Machiavelli, who can be placed as a courtier if you have any courtier space available. And the second exception is this Cannon's tile. This one is placed in your domain with the available side up. The next action I'm going to talk about is the trade. It's the action with this symbol. It is only located on this notable card, and for each ship you pay, you gain 2 florins. Then the next action is Annex. With this action you can seize control of a neutral city, so a city where there is no control marker. That city must be adjacent to any other of your cities, either by road, or you can also annex a port city, which is a city with this port symbol, from one of your port cities. So here, for example. If you want to annex a city by road, you have to pay the number of crowns higher than the value of the city. Here the value is 2, so you would, for example, have to spend 1, 2, 3 crowns. After you do, take one of your control markers, place it on that city, then find the city tile in the stack of city tiles and place it in your domain with the available side up. Then advance 1 space on the city track. The city track always reflects the number of cities you control on the map. If you have your agent in the city, your agent reduces the city value by 1. So in this case it would be only 1. On the other hand, if any other player has an agent in the city, it increases the value of the city by 1. So in this example, you would have to spend 4 crowns to seize control of this neutral city. If you do, and you place your control marker in the city, the agent still remains in that city, regardless if it's your agent or an agent of another player. If you want to annex a port city from one of your port cities, you also have to pay ships, and that is in addition to the number of crowns you have to pay. So in this case you would have to pay 4 crowns, and the number of ships you need to pay equals the number of sea regions you go through. So in this example it is just 1 sea region, so 1 ship would be enough. If, for example, you would like to annex Ancona from Rossano, you have to cross this border, which means you go through 2 sea regions. So in addition to 3 crowns you have to pay, you would also have to pay 2 ships. There are 2 more special cases which I want to mention here. First, some cities like Messina or Tunis have these port symbols in 2 different sea regions. So if you would annex Messina from Rossano, it is only 1 sea region. And similarly, if you go through Naples to Messina, it is also only 1 sea region. Then the second special case is this pirate symbol. You are not allowed to annex these pirate cities. You can only seize control of such city by force. Then with this next action, Wage War action, you can initiate 1 or more sieges against these neutral cities or cities controlled by an opponent. Those sieges will not be resolved during the action. They will all be resolved at the end of the spring phase. In order to perform the action, you will have to use these cavalry symbols and these ship symbols. For each 1 cavalry symbol, you may move 1 of your troops to an adjacent city by road. For each 1 ship symbol you spend, you move 1 of your troops across 1 sea. So from one of your port cities to any other port city, which can be even occupied by another player. You can move the same troop multiple times by using multiple symbols. You can even use multiple types. You can, for example, spend a cavalry and move your troop like this by land. Then you can spend the ship, move the troop by sea to another city, and so on. As long as you move through your own cities, you can continue moving your troops. If you move your troop to a city occupied by another player, you have to stop the movement and initiate the siege. And the same applies when you reach the neutral city, you have to end the movement there and initiate the siege. You can actually initiate a siege against a city which is already under a siege from another player. Note that when you have the card like this, you can either use 2 cavalry symbols or 1 war symbol. If you decide to take the war symbol for the siege at the end of the spring, take this war bonus token, and that means you are not allowed to use these 2 cavalry symbols. Or vice versa, if you use the cavalry, you are not allowed to take this bonus war token. The next action is the scheme action. With this action, you may move or remove agents either from your player board or from the game board or from alliances. For each mask symbol you spend, you have one of the following 4 options. First, you may move one of your agents or place one of your agents in any room on your player board, but only if that room doesn't contain any other agent yet. The second option is to place or move one of your agents in any city anywhere on the game board if that city doesn't contain an agent yet. The third option is to move one of your agents to any alliance which doesn't already contain an agent. And the fourth option is to remove an opponent's agent from anywhere in play. That agent is returned to that player's reserve. You start the game with 2 agents, yellow player starts the game with 3 agents, and anytime you gain a card with this symbol, which is exactly the same as this one, you gain another agent from the general supply. Now, each room in your palace and each city can contain maximum 1 agent. If you want to place your agent in the same room or same city, you must first use a mask symbol to remove that agent, and then with another mask symbol you can move your agent into that room or into a city. If you have any enemy agent in one of your rooms, one of your action spaces, you may not use that action space as long as that agent is present there. However, if you have an enemy agent on the scheme action, you may still use that action if you use the first mask to remove that agent, and then if you have any other remaining masks, you can use them to move your own agents or remove other enemy agents. As we have already seen, an agent in a neutral city increases the value of that city for you. If you have an agent in that city, it decreases the value of the city for you. When you place your agent in this alliance area, if it is another player's alliance, place your agent in the rightmost space. And it could be an empty space, or that space could be occupied by the opponent's marker. Place your agent in the rightmost space all the time. If you move your agent to your own alliance, always place it on top of your control disk. And if you move your agent to the alliance which is no one's, place your agent to the leftmost space. Once everyone has performed their action in the spring phase, it's time to resolve sieges. You resolve these sieges in this player order, and if you have initiated more than 1 siege, you may resolve them in any order you want. When resolving the siege, first determine the base attack and defense value. The attack value equals the number of troops present in the siege, so in this case 2. The base defense value of the neutral city is the value of the city, so in this case 2 as well. If you have your agent in the city, it reduces the defense value of the city by 1. If there's an agent of any other player in the city, that agent increases the defense value of the city by 1. If you besiege a city controlled by another player, the base defense value of that city is the value of the city plus the number of troops belonging to the defender. So in this example it's 2 plus 1. Again, if you have an agent in this city, it reduces the defense value of the city by 1. However, in this case, An agent of any other player, including the defender, does not increase the defense value of the city. So even in this case, the defense value would be 2 plus 1. Now, starting with the attacker, both the attacker and the defender can now add war bonuses, either by spending these war bonus tokens. When you do, you have to discard them, or from the cards in these Courtier spaces. And note, this symbol has one small florin indicated under the symbol, which means you have to pay 1 florin to use this symbol, and obviously you have to flip the card face down. You may also use these war bonuses from these 2 patronage cards or from this patronage tile. And since these patronage cards are not your Courtier cards, they are not flipped face down. So you can use this war bonus once per siege by paying 1 florin. And you can also use this war bonus once per siege, but only if you are the defender, and it adds +2 to your defense. And when you have this cannon patronage tile, again you have to pay 1 florin and add +2 to your attack or defense value, but in this case you have to flip the tile face down. And if you have an alliance with France, you can use this war bonus. Again, it adds +2 to your attack or defense value, but once you use it, you have to deactivate it. So players alternate adding these war bonuses from any of their available sources. You add these bonuses one by one, and once both players pass, the siege is complete. Now, if the attack value is higher than the defense value, the attacker wins. Otherwise, the defender wins. If you conquer a neutral city, here the attack value is 4, the defense value is 3, place your control disk in that city, any agents remain in that city, and find the city tile in the stack, place it in your domain with the exhausted side up. If the final defense value of the city is at least 3, which is in this case, you automatically lose 1 troop. That troop is always returned back to your reserve. Then at the end of the siege, all the war bonus tokens are discarded. If you conquer a city controlled by another player, replace the disk of that player with your own disk and place that conquered disk on this space on your player board. It's called a trophy, and you will score prestige points for your trophies at the end of the game. However, you can only have 1 trophy from each player. If you conquer another city of that player, simply return that disk to that player. Then again, if the final defense value of the city was at least 3, you automatically lose 1 of your troops. Then you lose 1 troop for each troop of the enemy. So in this case, you lose 1 additional troop. And then the defeated player loses all their troops in the city. Even if you lose all your troops this way, you still won the siege and conquered the city. Now take the corresponding city tile, but this time you take it from the other player, and again you place it face down in your domain. And if there is a cathedral in that city, you also take the cathedral tile from the other player, and again you place it face down into your domain. If you attack a city and your attack value is not greater than the defense value of the city, you are defeated, you automatically lose 1 troop, and all your remaining troops must retreat to a city under your control. Your city must be directly adjacent to the city you have not conquered, and you don't need to spend any cavalry symbols to retreat. If you attacked a port and you have to retreat, you may also retreat to a port city under your control by spending 1 ship per each troop per sea that you have to traverse. So in this example, since these troops only traverse through 1 sea, you have to spend 2 ships. Any of your troops which cannot retreat, or if you don't want them to retreat, are simply lost and returned back to your reserve. One important note: all retreats happen only at the end of the phase, once all the sieges are resolved, and these retreats happen in player order. If 2 players initiated a siege against the same city, they will first attack each other in what's called a battle on the plains. The combat strength of each player is only determined by the number of their troops, so here yellow player has 3, red player has 2, And then you can add the war bonuses if you choose to. And then the attacker with the higher combat strength wins this battle on the plains. In this example, it's the yellow player. All these war bonuses you spent in this battle are discarded. Then the loser loses all their troops and the attacker loses the same number of troops. The victor can now continue besieging the city with the remaining troops. If that prospect is no longer appealing, that player may simply decide to discontinue the siege and retreat at the end of the phase. If players are tied in this battle on the plains, both players lose one troop. Again, all the war bonus tokens are discarded, and they both have to retreat at the end of the phase. After you resolve all your sieges, if you still have any war bonus tokens, you have to discard them. You may not carry them over to another round. After all sieges are resolved and all the retreats are complete, you have to adjust this turn order based on the number of cities players control. Every time you seize control of a city or you lose control of a city, adjust your position on this city track, and if you move to a space which already contains some tokens, place your token on top of them. The number on this track indicates how many cities you control on the map. The player with the most cities under their control will be the first player, the player with the second highest number will be the second, and so on. And if there are more players in the same space, the relative order will be from top to bottom. So in this example, yellow player will be first, then green, then red. So adjust the position of these markers on this turn order track, and with that the spring phase is over. In the winter phase, players perform 5 administration steps in this turn order. Each player performs all 5 steps before another player performs their steps. First, you have to pay the salaries based on the number of troops you have on the map. If you only have 1 or 2 troops on the map, you don't have to pay anything. If you have 3 or 4 troops, you have to pay 1 florin, and if you have 5 or 6, you have to pay 2 florins. If you are not able or you don't want to pay the full salary, you may pay as much as you want, and then remove all the unpaid troops from the map. Then in the second step, you may reorganize the cards in your palace. You may move the cards from the action spaces to the Courtier spaces and vice versa from the Courtier spaces to your action spaces. Or you may move the cards from one Courtier space to another Courtier space. You always move one card at a time, and you may never move the card from one action space directly to another action space. In addition, you may never move the cards out of the room or into the room which contains your action marker or an Indulgence card or the enemy agent. You may only move the card from the Courtier space if the card is face up. So if you want to move it to your action space, it must be face up. The same applies if you want to move it to another Courtier space. When you move the card from the action space to a Courtier space, it must be flipped face down. Then, when moving the cards, you may never leave the actionless card alone in the action space. When you move the cards from your rooms to the Courtier spaces, make sure you observe the limit of your available Courtier spaces. And if you have some of these additional Courtier spaces available, you can always use a different space available as long as you don't exceed the limit. So, for example, you can take this improvement card and move it to one of the Courtier spaces and again flip it face down. If you need a Courtier space and you don't have any more available, you can free up the Courtier space by discarding the card, even if it is with the exhausted side up. If it is the notable card, you return it back to the display. If it is your family card, you remove the card from the game. If you have additional Courtier space because you control 5 or more cities and then you lose control of the city, you also lose that additional space, and you have to decide which of those additional spaces become unavailable. If that space has a card in it, you may either move it to any other available space or discard it. Then in the next step, you may buy as many different cards and tiles as you wish. You do that by spending resources in the top left of the card, and all these purchases are simultaneous, so you may not purchase the card and immediately use the symbol from that card to pay for another card. All the cards you buy must be immediately placed in one of your empty Courtier spaces. You may not place them directly into your rooms, and if you don't have any spaces available, remember you may always free up the Courtier space by discarding the card from that space, even if you use the symbol from that card to pay for the card you have just bought. When you buy cards and tiles, there is only one restriction. Some of these cards and tiles have this small number 1 in the top right hand corner, and that indicates that you can only own one copy of such card or a tile. When you buy these titles, you can only buy the title of your color. You can also buy this guild, and there are 2 tiles called Kingdom and 2 are called Republic. These contradict each other, so you can only own one or the other. You may not own both of them. If you control a city with the base value 3 or higher, you can buy this cathedral tile. You would place that tile face down, so with the exhausted side up in your domain, and place this cathedral token in the city. Each cathedral you own at the end of the game is worth 1 prestige point. Every time you gain a tile with this symbol, it unlocks additional Courtier space in your palace. Every time you gain this symbol, you gain another agent from the general supply. And there's one last restriction. Even though you may have any number of copies of many cards, you may only purchase one copy of each card during one winter phase. Then in the next step, you can recruit your available troops. You can only recruit in a city you control, and if you recruit a troop in your starting city, it costs 1 florin, so you have to pay the florin, take the available troop, and place it on the map. If you recruit in a city which you control but it is not your starting city, you need to pay 3 florins. Then in the last step you can form alliances. Each major power can only be allied with one player, and the cost to form this alliance is printed directly under that major power. However, if you have an agent with that alliance, you get a discount of 1 symbol of your choice. After that, place your control disk in the leftmost space, and if you have an agent there, keep it on your disk. If the major power has an alliance with another player, you may not change that, but if you have your agent there, then you can change that alliance. This time you don't get any discount, you have to pay the full price, but then you return the disk of the other player to its owner and replace it with your own disk. You can even form an alliance if there is an enemy agent there, but no enemy disk. You would have to pay the full price, place your disk in the leftmost space and move the agent to the right space. Although you may have alliances with more than one major power, you can only form one alliance per one winter phase. If you have an alliance, you have a corresponding bonus available. If you decide to spend that bonus, you have to cover it with your marker. And in order to reactivate it back, remember, you have to use this govern action. If you have an alliance with a major power, but there's an enemy agent on the bonus, you may not use that bonus unless you remove that agent with a scheme action. Just like in spring, you can request Indulgence once per winter phase, but only if the action space with your action marker does not already contain one Indulgence card. So, for example, if the action marker will be located here, you are not allowed to request an Indulgence. When you gain an Indulgence, place the Indulgence card on the current action space and gain 1 crown or 3 florins. The game ends when, at the end of the spring phase, all cities on the map are controlled by players, so there are no neutral cities available, or any player reached the last space on the city track, or any player reached the last space on this patronage track. Then carry out the winter phase as normal, and then the game ends. Then calculate the prestige points for each player. First, players gain victory points based on the number of cities they control on the map. Furthermore, the player who is furthest on this track gains additional 1 victory point. If players are tied, all such players gain this prestige point bonus. The same applies to this patronage track. Each player gains prestige points based on the position of their marker, and the player furthest ahead on this track gains an additional prestige point bonus. Then you may gain prestige points from tiles or cards in your domain or in your palace. For each Indulgence card still present in your palace, you lose a prestige point. Then you gain 2 prestige points for each trophy you have in your palace. You also score 1 prestige point for each active alliance. Then count all the cross symbols in your domain, in your palace. And you can also include this cross symbol from the alliance with the Holy Roman Empire if that cross is not covered by the enemy agent. If it is, you may not include it. If it is not, you do count that cross even if it's covered by your own disc. Then the player with the most crosses gains 4 prestige points, the second player 2 prestige points, and in a 3-player you skip this position, so the third player would gain nothing. And in case players are tied, both players would get a prestige points from the next lower rank. Then the player with the most prestige points is the winner. For the reference, the winning score is usually in the neighborhood of 15 prestige points. So that's how you play Virtu. If you have any questions or comments, I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. If you like the series, please subscribe. You can support the channel on the Patreon page. You've been watching Game in a Nutshell. My name is Branislav Berec and hope to see you next time. I would like to thank everyone who has ever supported the channel, and especially the current supporters listed on this page. If you too would like to support the channel in creation of videos like this and other video tutorials and other content on this channel, please visit the patreon.com/Nithrania.